So now we've got to talk about how does power work in Elizabethan England, right? How does the system of government actually work when there is a king or queen, in this case, in charge of the whole system? See, let's compare governments and think about what the actual differences between them are. See, I'm going to start talking about how the government works nowadays. Nowadays, there is still a king in charge of England, but that's more of a ceremonial role than actual decision making. A long time ago, Britain became a democracy, which many of you will know from citizenship. The people in the country get to vote on how this country works. And the way we do this is we have representatives. The people vote on these representatives, known as members of parliament, MPs. And these politicians, these MPs, go to represent people's views and go to a particular location, Parliament, to go and vote on laws. There is a lot of different people involved. There is a lot of discussion, a lot of argument to make decisions in, well, Britain nowadays. But then, back in the past, back for Elizabeth at least, the thing is, Elizabeth is the only one with that decision-making power. It isn't resting on the power of other people. The decision is with one person only, which means Parliament back then, because it did exist, is one of many different groups of advisors. They are trying to give advice to Elizabeth, to influence Elizabeth, to make decisions that benefit the people, but also benefit themselves. Now, these four groups all kind of come together to, should we say, put influence, to give advice, to say, oh, this is a good idea, that sounds like a bad idea. It's all going towards Elizabeth so that she can make the decision. That system of advisors, politicians, influencers means that the system becomes very different nowadays. So I'll just go through the four so we know who they are, but they all have different roles and different responsibilities. So Parliament is exactly the same. They are elected advisors. They are likely educated and rich men, to be honest, but they are elected advisors that are trying to represent the people. They can make some laws, but frankly, the power is all in Elizabeth's hands. There is also this group behind me, which is called the Justices of the Peace. These people go and, should we say, set out the law in England. They go out and actually enforce laws. Imagine them like police officers. They would understand, should we say, experts in law, how laws work, what the consequences of decision making would be, and would go out and enact it. This group to the left of Elizabeth here is called the Lord Lieutenants. This is actually a role Elizabeth decides on, but these people go off and try and run war for Elizabeth. They will go and fight wars for her. They will go run areas of the country for her, so they understand those areas in depth, but also have advice about military aspects. And then the top left is arguably one of the most important ones. It is the Privy Council. The Privy Council is made up of the nobility, the richest people, the largest landowners, and this group has massive amounts of power over Elizabeth because they are the people with money. They are the people with power and connections abroad. They are the people that, frankly, she wants to keep happy if she wants to keep in power. So as much as I'm telling you that Elizabeth has all the power, these groups, if Elizabeth, should we say, annoys them or upsets them, can reduce Elizabeth's power in return. And that's why this system, well, worked. Elizabeth needed to appease these groups, and these groups needed to appease Elizabeth, so they would try to work together to make laws happen. Now, the thing is, you need to know them in a little more detail than that. But to be simple enough for you, power works in Elizabethan England to, should we say, discuss between groups. This connection of influence is how laws got made. And you, if you have a look in your textbook, need to make sure you can demonstrate you understand what those four groups are and how they relate to Elizabeth. There's a few other significant court figures you might know the name of, a guy called William Cecil or Francis Walsingham, spy masters and, should we say, other heads of the Privy Council, for example, but knowing the basics is absolutely necessary. So if you can do these things, if you can tell me what these are really clearly or physically written down, then you have done this section. If you can tell me what Parliament is, what its responsibility is, and how it works, you're sorted. If you can tell me about the Privy Council, who it's made up of, and how it influences Elizabeth, you're sorted. If you can tell me about the Justices of the Peace and what their responsibility is, good. And lastly, you can tell me what the Lord Lieutenants are and how they work, then you know this section. Use the textbook pages on Teams, use the rest of the videos in this system, but I'll be using these phrases going forward. Thank you very much. Off you go.